I think every business, large or small, should say, okay, if something hits the fan, what is our game plan? Avoidance, sticking your head in the sand is not it. You want to address it quickly.
And welcome to a new episode of Digital Coffee Marketing Brew. And I'm your host, Brett Deister. And if you can please subscribe to this podcast and all your favorite podcasting apps, leave a 5-star review. It really does help with the rankings. So let me know how I am doing. But this week, I have Angela with me, and she is a global communication professional with over 20 years of experience. She has worked on projects across 5 continents, including 2 years in Sierra Leone. And during the Ebola virus crisis, she is the founder and CEO of Benicourt Group, a strategic communication and marketing firm dedicated to amplifying individuals, businesses, and organizations driving positive environmental and social impact. But welcome to the show, Angela.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, the first question I ask all my guests is, are you a coffee or tea drinker?
I am a coffee drinker. I love tea, so no hate on the tea, but I'm a coffee drinker for sure.
Anything specific, or is it just Starbucks or whatever else is in the Keurig?
I brew my own coffee at home. I have my little percolator cafetera thing that I use, and I make myself very, very strong cups of coffee in the morning. And then I have my little favorite creamer that I put into it. But if I'm out and about and need a bit of coffee, yeah, I try to go to coffee places that are unique to the destination. And if all else fails, can't go wrong with a grande coffee from Starbucks.
Yeah, it's easier to find, but I get you about finding the little independent shops. They usually have the better cups of coffee.
Exactly.
So I gave a brief summary of your expertise. Can you give our listeners a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I've been working in PR marketing industry for over 20 years, and my career trajectory has been extremely nonlinear. I've worked in so many different industries, started off in hospitality and worked my way through several PR agencies in New York and agencies with offices in San Francisco and just, the really big cities. And I worked in-house for some very large brands. And then the last couple of years, my work has been focused on environmental and social impact. And what does that mean? Essentially, I love working with businesses, organizations, individuals that are trying to do good things for the planet, whether that is a ocean advocacy nonprofit, whether it's a film that talks about climate change in a really great storytelling way, or a business that is creating products out of recycled materials. These are the types of businesses and organizations and individuals that I love working with because they're doing such interesting, cool things. And I just want to be there to help them amplify and elevate these stories and their projects so that more people are aware of what they are doing.
Got you. So how do you adapt messaging to resonate with diverse markets and cultures across different continents?
Absolutely. So it really comes down to your audience. It comes down to the people you're serving. Who is the product for? Who is this nonprofit for? Who are the people that you are trying to help? And once you have identified these elements, then you create messaging that helps you best deliver your message, your story, what you're trying to achieve to this audience. And so it doesn't matter if I'm working in Sierra Leone or working on a client project in Kenya or on a project in London. I always think about, who are we in service for? Who is this for? What are we trying to achieve? And why does this product or service or film or whatever it might be important to your audience, and how it's going to make their lives or their community or the planet more generally better? And so that's true of the audience. It's true of the culture that you're in. It's really about having your audiences come first in your messaging and how it benefits them. And once you know the context, then you can adapt your message to that context in a way that will resonate.
And then what's if a marketer's like never been to that country, but they have to talk to it? Like, how's the best way of figuring that out? Because I think most of the problem is that if you've never been to a place, don't know the culture of the place, don't know how they speak, slang, or whatever, it's harder to make a message for something you have no idea about.
Yeah. And I think luckily for technology, there are so many ways to access culture these days. And so, to anyone who's trying to break into a new market or wants to introduce a product to an entirely different culture, the first thing is, I would say, is if you don't know anything about that culture, find someone who does. Connect with them on social media, reach out to them on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and schedule a call on WhatsApp, on Zoom, and talk to them. Talk to them about their community, about who they are, about what matters to this community, because it has to be people first. It has to be person first and humanity forward. And so once you can find someone who's essentially your translator, your introduction to a culture, um, that local person is going to know that culture. And so rely on them, talk to them as a way to understand what you're trying to achieve, right? Um, if you determine that your product or your service is going to do good in this community, all you have to do is get into this community, then starting with the people there, the local people there, you can't go wrong.
All right. And I mean, even for like a preliminary like research, is AI okay for that? Like just to do your topical research and then talk to somebody? Because sometimes you don't even know where to start.
Absolutely. I think it's really great to educate yourself about a market ahead of time. And I think, 40 years ago, that would have been an encyclopedia or whatever, 50 years ago. And then later on, it would have been, you know, you would just go, you'd go on Google and look. So if you tell AI or OpenAI or any of these Gemini or any of these other platforms, hey, I need a brief history about this country. I need to understand I need a little bit of understanding of this story of this country, and this AI platform gives you the answer. I think that's great. I think it's really great. I think it shows your effort in wanting to understand a culture ahead of speaking to someone there, and you can say, I here's what I discovered online, right? That this, X country, X city, X whatever is such and such and such and such and such, and historically XYZ. And now that I have that information, I want to hear it from you. What's your lived experience there? What's your actual day to day? What is of the time right now? Right. So 100%, sure. Use whatever knowledge source you can to educate yourself. Obviously, you want to make sure everything's factual and that you're getting information from credible places. And yeah, I think it's respectful to educate yourself ahead of a conversation with a person. But I don't think that um, Google research and or any artificial intelligence is a replacement for a conversation with an actual person in this destination. I think it's complementary, and I think it's setting the foundation for a conversation.
So basically, Gen Z making ChatGPT their like life guide is probably the worst thing you can do right now.
I think asking ChatGPT about to make a bunch of assumptions about people in a certain culture, and then you just walk into that culture with all these assumptions that whatever the platform gave you, I don't recommend. I don't recommend. Um, I don't think anyone would want that to be their own experience. I don't necessarily know if I want someone to just go onto, an AI platform, pull up a bunch of stuff about my city, and then be like, so this is what I know about your city. And this is what I've assumed about all of you, everyone here, when that's just, I don't recommend. I do think it's great for research. I do think it's great to empower yourself with knowledge ahead of a conversation. But this is one of those areas where at the end of the day, a Zoom call, a WhatsApp call is still extremely necessary when you're talking about bringing something to a market. And I think some great people will tell you, if you're developing a product, test it out in the market as quickly as possible, right? Don't wait for it to be perfect. And you want to put it out there and get real human feedback about the product. So yeah, AI does not replace a conversation.
And can you share an example of a global communication campaign you led that had a significant impact, and what factors contributed to its success?
Yeah. So one example that I'll share that I felt really felt international to me. The 2 years that I was in Sierra Leone, there were a lot of different things going on in this program, a lot of incredible things that the people on this team were able to do that was just brilliant. And in the big scheme of things, had great impact in society. But one of the things that I was tasked to help lead, at least from the communications and marketing side, was the country's first ever renewable energy conference. And we had a very short window of time to pull this off. And it required participation and collaboration with the Minister of Energy and his team at that time of administration. It required a lot of input. It required a lot of funding. It required a lot of different things. And we invited several hundred people from around the world to attend this conference. So the majority of attendees were Sierra Leonean, but we had people come in from Nigeria. We had people come in from China. We had people come in from Europe, the United States. I was part of the team helping to literally send out those invitations and coordinate their visas upon arrival. And then this conference was part of a bigger story. Sierra Leone was one of the first countries to sign an agreement or a compact with the Energy Africa campaign, which was at the time a British-led initiative to help bring renewable energy power to a region of the world that was so energy poor. And Sierra Leone was one of the first countries, or I believe the first country, to sign this compact. And so we're talking like ministers from other countries. It was a big deal. And this conference was born out of the signing of this compact that was like, okay, well, we're going to have these ministers come in and sign this document. We might as well build a bigger conversation around it. And several things happened. One, it was wildly successful conference. Very, very proud of that. And so many pieces went into it. And it was really about informing and letting the world know, especially European markets, that Ebola was in the past. The country was now looking forward to the next step, to recovery, to thriving, to bouncing back. And the renewable energy market was ripe and ready for investment. And so my part was to get out press releases, help set up press conferences to let the world know that Sierra Leone gets 6 months of sunshine a year, opposite of the rainy season, which is like another 6 months, and that's a whole other thing. This country with so much sunshine and so much opportunity was ready for renewable energy sources from all over the world. And long story, it's already a long story, but longer story short, the campaign resulted in over 24 international media coverage from Europe, from around the greater African region, from London, which is a really, really big deal. And so I would say that was a very successful campaign to let the world know that Sierra Leone is, ready for investment, ready for renewable energy business.
Got you. And was there any pitfalls you had to overcome, and how did you overcome those pitfalls with?
So many. One, we were a small team. I'm very, till this day, I'm just in awe of what this team was able to accomplish, literally in like a 3-month period to pull something of this magnitude off. The other worry is that this whole conference was about bringing renewable energy to a country that is energy poor, that does not have a power grid that can be, at the time, power and bring energy to everyone. And so one of our worries that would have been super ironic, but possibly also proving a point, is what if the power goes off during the conference? Like, what if that happens? So it didn't. We prepared adequately for that moment to avoid that moment from happening. But that was something we had to overcome. We had to come up with a plan. Another point to overcome was the coordinating international visas and the access of logistical access from the airport of Sierra Leone to the mainland part of Sierra Leone, which required a boat ride. So there was a lot of questions around how do we get people that are coming in smoothly transitioned from the airport, which required, a bus ride, a boat ride, a bus ride, and get them to this conference, especially people that have never been to the country before. We wanted to make sure there was food at this conference. And so finding partners that would cater to this amount of people. So there were several challenges that we had to overcome. One of the most interesting ones was Sierra Leone has what they call paramount chiefs, which is kind of a governor, if you will. They have 149 paramount chiefs, which kind of represent these different states within Sierra Leone, and they're kind of like governors would be in the United States. Most of these chiefs do not have internet connection. So to invite them, it required old school texting and keeping track of this long list, right? It was like, how do we email? We can't email them. We can't, send them an invite, and we can't mail them an invite. How do we invite these paramount chiefs to come to this event? And so there was no other way than to just sit there one evening with my colleague and just start texting on a flip phone. It was, sometimes you just have to get back to basics to overcome challenges. When technology cannot help you, you have to just go back to the basics. And I find that to be an interesting life lesson in many ways.
Yes, sometimes old tech is the best tech.
Exactly. Or no tech is the best. Yeah. So it was interesting. You really have to just be resourceful and really creative. And so I really like to think about those opportunities as they're not so much challenges, but if you've ever wanted to try to think outside the box, here you go. Here's the opportunity to get really creative and to literally think outside of the parameters that you're accustomed to.
And then how can small businesses with limited budgets adopt a global? And then how can small businesses with limited budgets?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. Because again, I think that probably now more than ever, it's so easy to connect with people around the world and really leverage the technologies that are currently available. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. I think the key though is strategy. Where do you want to go? Why do you want to go there? And what benefit can you provide to the people there? And so that is the main thing. I love seeing small jewelry brands and other businesses that have very small operations in the States, but they're eager to bring their product and ship to people. And so the question is, if you really believe in your product doing well there and it makes sense for what you're trying to achieve and you can identify your target audience in these markets, then there's never been a better time to set yourself up logistically to support that, right? It's easy now to ship products worldwide, easier than it's ever been. And so you think about, what does that look like logistically for you, right? And I think that really just having a plan of action, of execution that makes sense for your operations is the key. And thinking about things like pricing. What about shipping fees? What about maybe any import fees? Are these things that you want to absorb? Are you going to work them into your international pricing for your customers to cover those costs? And so when you start thinking about the customer first and their experience, that will guide, I think that would really guide you as to the best way to bring your product to a new country. Does the infrastructure there support this? Do you want to set up? There's a brand that I really love. She does like home interior, and she's just always been British based. And not too long ago, she posted on her Instagram that she opened up this huge warehouse in the United States, and she's high volume, very recognized brand in Europe. And she posted this huge warehouse in the United States. And her thing was, okay, US folks, now it's going to be easiest as it's ever been for you to order these products, because she's thinking about people first. And, in an age where you can have same day or next day delivery and sometimes overnight delivery, what does that look like? What does the delivery process look like for your customer? So once you start thinking about customer first, I think that is your North Star in how you enter any new market, but especially an international market.
And have the tariffs actually played any role in maybe negatively impacting all that stuff? Because I know, at least in the US, we do have uncertainty in that. And so has it negatively impacted going more global because of it's more expensive? It's more expensive maybe to ship into the United States or whatever?
That's a really great question. I think it depends on the industry. And I also think it depends on your and I think it's going to be very personal to the business. So I think some industries are going to be feeling it a lot more than other industries. I know in the retail industry, I'm hearing retailers that are, again, European based, that have US audiences, US customers. Some of them are just absorbing the costs. They're saying, we're not increasing prices. We're going to absorb the cost on our end to keep things smooth for the customer. And so it's really, I think that to different degrees, the tariffs are going to impact, especially if you rely on international shipping. You have an international audience already. I think it's going to perhaps impact your supply chain, and definitely some industries more than others. And so I think if you're in an industry where tariffs are going to impact you, it's rough. It's a hard time. And I think it really comes down to the current state of your business and where you're based and what resources might be available for you as a business owner in your particular area, and also your ability to absorb or not the price of what it's going to cost your customer. And I think I've already seen prices go up. I've gotten like notifications that prices are going to go up in some stores. And that really just comes down to that individual business, some larger than others, that are saying, you know what, it's prices are going to go up a little bit. We're going to absorb a little bit, or we're absorbing everything, and we want to keep things the same price for you. And that's what I've seen from retailers that have one or two retailers that I've seen that I'm a customer of, they have absorbed the price, and just to keep it better for the customer. So it's a great question, but it's a hard question, because I think it depends on the industry, and I think it depends on your supply chain, and I think it depends on the current status of your business. I think if you're hurting, it might just hurt even more. And if you're in a position where you can survive it, I think, that's good for you. I saw in the news there was farming community that said, we can absorb the costs for the next couple of months, but after that, we might be in trouble, right? So I just think it depends.
And what do you believe are the most common mistakes companies make when facing a PR crisis, and how can they avoid that?
So crises will happen, right? Just like in life, right? Things happen. And to avoid is not the approach. I think every business, large or small, should say, okay, if something hits the fan, what is our game plan? Avoidance, sticking your head in the sand, is not it. You want to address it quickly. You want to research, get to the bottom of things, and you want to be prepared to explain what happened. But even more importantly, accountability. Someone's got to be accountable for what happened. If it was an error that your organization made, and I've seen it happen all the time in smaller levels of, sorry, this shipment just isn't going to get to you on time. We made a mistake with our XYZ shipping process. Here's what we're doing to correct it. Here's what we're going to do in the future to let it not happen again. And here's 10% off, right? Like, you never want to avoid. If you're in a crisis situation and you're still needing to assess, the first thing that you can do is say, we're in a crisis situation and I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. We're getting to the bottom of it. We're investigating. We're looking into it. We are taking action. That is key. Avoidance, denying is not going to work, especially not in this day where things will get tweeted, things will just get shared quicker than you can even say, right? And so the key is acknowledge, investigate, understand what's going on, take corrective action, take accountability, take corrective action. If it was something that's out of your control, but it's still impacting your business or it's still kind of brought you into a crisis, same thing applies. You have to recognize what role you played in a crisis. And if there was no role at all, well, what role are you going to play in the solution? You want to make sure you're taking action. You want to make sure you immediately communicate what you're doing to correct the problem, what you're doing to avoid it from happening ever again. And then you want to continue to take those steps to show that you've made a difference. Sending out a press release, but not taking any action behind the scenes is a negative. Action. You want to take action and you want to find solutions and you want to put things into place to avoid these things happening ever again.
And then in your experience, how can storytelling play a role in rebuilding public trust after a crisis? Because there is that after the crisis ends, you have to rebuild that trust again.
Right. And that's why your response to the crisis is so important for how things are going to play out. Because by tackling it head on, not sticking your head in the sand, by tackling it head on and saying, this happened. If there needs to be an apology, then you apologize. And then you take corrective action and you show transparency, because your response is where the trust begins. If you're avoidant, if you're in denial, if you push blame to everyone else except for yourself or your company or whomever or whatever happened, you are breaking the foundation of trust. And so from the very beginning, trust is on the table. How you respond and what you do every step of the way until it's resolved, and then what you do after, is where the trust is. If you're shady, you're not clear in your communications, you're denying, you're placing blame everywhere except for where you need to be, if you're not taking accountability, if you're screaming at people, yelling at people on Threads, Instagram, whatever it is, you are not going to be seen as a trustful person. And now a situation that was already bad is now 10 times worse. And it's going to be much more difficult to recover from just because of failure to take those steps. So if you do those things and tackle it head on and apologize sincerely if you need to, and take corrective action, and then demonstrate, show people, don't just tell people, show people what you are doing. What does that look like? Maybe it's a tour of your factory. Maybe it's, it's a visibility report. It's something, but you're transparent about what you're doing and you're demonstrating that you've taken actionable steps. Then the next step is here are the outcome of the steps we have taken. And you're transparent and open. It's a town hall. It's a ask me anything on, it's an Instagram live. It's whatever it is. Now you are saying, gosh, things happen, things hit the fan, things go wrong, but this person was on top of it. They stayed ahead of it. They are sincere. They're taking actions. And that's all part of that storytelling, right? Talking about who you are. And when a crisis happens, leaning on those initial values and tripling down on your stance and your mission is extremely important. And so your storytelling is happening in your accountability and the actions that you're taking. Here's an infographic of the 10 steps we took to correct action. Here is an IG live with a non-leadership, an employee, whoever, who is our testimonial to what we're doing. Here's a third party independent person that came in to review, and here's their outcome. We're putting it all out for you to see. Here's, the story is that narrative that you're telling. And so the actions turn into the stories that you're telling your audience. And then afterward, you continue to tell the story of, a year has passed. Reflect on what you've learned. Reflect on the impact. Demonstrate a year later, 2 years later, that you're still keeping your word about the things that you said. Those are the stories that you want to start telling very early on and continue to tell in your business, service, organization, etc.
Got you. And can you share a specific story about a challenging crisis you managed and how you successfully navigated
I
it?
have a few. I'm trying to think. I would say part of me is I'm also grateful that I haven't been a part of a crisis that was like so, an international incident or anything like that. I'd like to think that the organizations and the businesses that I've worked with have been really good about putting practices and procedures in place to avoid those types of things. But I will share one story that I think was kind of interesting in my experience in Sierra Leone around this conference. We had someone, I was mentioning that we have these international visas that needed to be established as a landing visa so that number one, they would be emailed ahead of time to the attendees, and there would be a visa available for them, the actual visa available for them at the airport. I had somebody coming in from China that I guess the email was sent to them en route to Nigeria, their connecting flight, and they never couldn't access their emails or didn't have internet connection. And now they're in a connecting flight in Nigeria, and the Nigerian airport wasn't going to let them leave. So I start getting calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, hi, I'm coming from here. I need to get into this. This is someone who we needed to have at this conference. And I quickly knew that this was going to be a problem. And I was like, how do I solve, I'm not I'm not a, visa person. I'm not part of this government at all. It's wild that they're calling me, but I guess because it was part of this invitation process, they were calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I remember speaking to Nigerian authorities about that. In fact, we had sent this visa to this person, that they're not staying there. They're trying to get in transit. Talk about interacting with someone of a different culture, of a powerful position. And I'm not a person of government authority of any kind, but I'm trying to work out with this person. They were a little bit panicked, a little bit, if you can imagine, you're traveling this long way. And then once again, I was able to somehow talk to them. They were able to get on the flight. And when they landed in Sierra Leone, their visa wasn't there. So now it was more phone calls. And I'm just sitting here thinking, this is bad. How do we get this person in? And I can't solve this. I need to call some people. I didn't really know what to do. And I was feeling a little bit panicked. But I realized that we did have these, even though the documentation wasn't there, I knew that we could produce this documentation eventually. And so I just took a deep breath. I calmed myself and I thought, okay, let me start calling some people that can make these decisions to let someone into a country. That's not me. It was just interesting that they were calling me, and so again, it was very early in the morning at this time, and I spoke to a lot of authorities. And I also said that, well, the Minister of Energy will vouch for this, because I had a good relationship with the Minister of Energy. Wild. And it worked out, but I realized it did all work out in the end, but I realized it was I felt like it was a situation where I could have overstepped boundaries, or the immigration officer did get mad at me. I'm like, this is not, so of course you don't want to, you want to keep a clear head, and you want to ensure that you are bringing people if you can't solve a problem, you need to bring the people into the fold that can solve the problem. And if they're not available to solve the problem, then you need to refer them to other people that can solve the problem. And I think it was like if he couldn't get in, they were going to send him back. It was this whole dramatic thing. In the end, I was like, look, I know that the Minister of Energy would be okay with this person coming in. And in the end, it worked out. But it was a little bit nerve-wracking for me. This is international officials, and I'm just someone working there, you know. It could have been a crisis, I think, but it turned out not to be. And I like to think that I took the right steps in de-escalating, in talking to people, in leveraging relationships, in talking, just pulling from resources that I can in order to make it so that this person can indeed attend this conference. And they were really upset, which has kind of added extra intensity to the situation. But it worked out. It was a crisis averted story, I would say.
And how do you advise organizations to shift public narratives during polarizing and emotionally charged situations?
Ooh, we're seeing that, right? We're seeing that play out right now in real time. And I very much admire the organizations that are sticking with their mission and sticking with their initial approach to things, and are not wavering in their commitment to what they said they were going to set out to do. I truly admire, because that's the hard thing to do. It's easy to say, okay, and change course with the wind. It's much harder to say, no, we we will always represent these people, and we're going to continue to represent these people no matter who says we need to not represent these people. That is sticking with your values. Sticking with your values is not easy. And the strength of your values when they're tested, right? When you get tested, that's when you really know the strength of your values and your conviction to your mission as an organization. And so if you've established a business with a certain mission and a certain value system, and it's worked for you, you are a thriving business, a business people love, and you stick with it during hard times, that says something about the character of that business. And it's the same thing about that person. If somebody is really passionate and authentic and true about their intentions, good intentions, and they're tested and they stick with it despite pressures, outside pressures, that's extremely hard to do. And I admire organizations that say, we're sticking with our value system, we're sticking with our mission, we're not changing course because it doesn't work with some external factor.
Got you. And then what advice would you give an organization aiming to integrate proactive crisis communication planning into their overall marketing strategy?
Yes, everyone should have one. Everyone should have one, no matter what size of your organization. What is this thing? Do a SWOT analysis, right? Old school SWOT analysis. We always hear about SWOT analysis forever and ever in college and ever and ever. Do the SWOT analysis, because in that SWOT analysis, you have what? Your threats, right? And so the old school SWOT analysis, I think, is underrated. Look into that, right? What are the threats that are facing your business? And just get your team together and say, gosh, what are all the things that could go wrong? Play devil's advocate. What are all the things that could go wrong? What if someone says this? What if we put out this message and they start wanting to cancel us? What if we decide that we want to put out this product and it turns out to be a bad product that malfunctions? We need to do a recall. It's a fun exercise. Do the whole SWOT, because it's nice to see your opportunities and it's nice to see, your strengths and what are your weaknesses and what are your threats. And that is a great way, old school way, to really get into the things that could potentially hinder your business or hurt your reputation, right? From a PR side, what does that look like? Do you have messaging points? Are your people media trained? Your employees are your best, like cheerleaders, right? Or not, right? So, what is your culture? Is there some stuff going on that if it's, if it made the news, or if someone, did a TikTok about it, or if somebody did something, can that hurt you? Is there, what's shady? And so when you look at these, weaknesses and threats in your business, I think that gives you a really good foundation as to, okay, here are really the things that can hurt us if it goes wrong, and it goes in violation of our values and our culture. So let's put in a process in place, right? And once you have that process, delegate. Who's going to be in charge of putting, you have your messaging points, but then who's going to be in charge of the specific messaging points of the situation? Who's going to take those points and put it on social? Who's going to get in front of the camera, do a press conference? Hopefully the CEO or the business or the leader of the organization, or you or whoever. You want to have a plan, and your plan starts with understanding your vulnerabilities as a business, vulnerabilities in your culture, vulnerabilities in your operations, vulnerability in your business practices. All of these areas can be potential sparks for crisis. And you also want to think about, well, what if a crisis falls on our lap that has nothing to do with us? We are just minding our own business, but somebody packaged something in a bad packaging, and you happen to use a similar type of packaging, but it's different, and now you get dragged through the mud because of whatever. It's good to think about these things too, and have a game plan. Acknowledge, investigate, take corrective action if it's necessary, issue an apology if it's necessary, accountability, and then the steps to make things better. That's going to look a little bit different for every organization, especially large organizations. You really want to have your team, your crisis team, that you activate in the event that you need to do it, so that there's not pandemonium and craziness going around and panicking, right? So yeah, that would be my advice.
Gotcha. And then what future trends do you foresee in global communications and crisis management that businesses should start preparing for now?
Absolutely. I think AI is like the best thing ever and the worst thing ever, right? In many ways, I think AI could be your best friend, or it could be I think about the people that are just getting these deep fake things made of them, people that are creating there was a journalist. Here's a crazy thing, and you can look this up because it's happening. Journalists that are interviewing fake people, they don't know that they're fake. There was an NPR story about a summer reading list of books that didn't exist. And authors were like, I didn't write that. Right? So these are all crises that you were just minding your own business, and now someone fake wrote an AI book and put your name on it or something, and now it's ranking in NPR, and you're like, what? I didn't write this. I didn't put this out there. So we're definitely getting in an era where crises can just come knocking at your door for no apparent reason, and you're just minding your own business via whether it's like deep fakes or scams. There was the author of Diary of a CEO, Steve Bartlett. He put out a message not to give people money, because people are setting up fake entire websites with his personality and like defrauding people out of so much money. And he was like, no, that is not me. I'm not doing that. He's just someone, he's this person building this business, building this empire. And now you have someone over here taking advantage of that, creating these crises that you had nothing to do with. So it's crazy time. It's a crazy time, I think, for crisis communications, because you can get dragged into something you had absolutely nothing to do with. So just like Steve did in response to that, I would say you need to put this into your future plans and know that there are people out there who might want to ruin your image, ruin your reputation, steal your ideas, do your ideas. I mean, think about like this Hermes bag Chinese TikTok video and the fallout of like, oh my gosh, what are our bags really worth? And I think those luxury brands were kind of like, some of them are doubling down, like, no, we really do make our things in Italy. Here's video proof, like, let's discount that. Another example of how crises can just develop around you. So I think it's really, really important. Number one, to, again, if you get caught up in one of these crises, you do not want to spend a second of hesitation to get out there and correct the record. Nope, that's not me. Nope, that's not us. Nope, this is not us. This is who we are. And use every platform you have to debunk anything that's being said about you. And even then, it could still have a tarnish on your reputation, right? And that's when storytelling becomes more powerful than ever, because eventually that will fade. The next crisis will erupt. That will fade into the background given time. And now you need to be out there doubling down on your vision, your mission, your statements, who you are, and produce lots and lots of content across as many platforms as you can in order to continue to debunk, even if it's been years, to continue to double down on who you are as a business organization. But it's very interesting times, and I'm constantly seeing crises pop up that have nothing to do with the person involved, like the person they're mentioning, no fault of their own. It's just someone decided to do a deep fake. Somebody set up a fake web page and took millions of dollars from people. It's really unfortunate, but storytelling and establishing your reputation and your brand about who you are, right? Because brand is not just the logo. The brand is who you are fundamentally. And really strengthening that over and over again, right? Through marketing practices, through public relations, communications, is going to be the best way to avoid or survive any type of a crisis of this nature.
Got you. And then people are listening to this podcast and they're wondering, where can they find you online to learn more?
Yeah. So my LinkedIn, which is, I think, just Angela Benicourt 1, I think is my like LinkedIn thing. Angela Benicourt, you'll see my picture. I have my LinkedIn banner is scuba diving. So you can find me there. That's a really great place. From there, you can get to my business website. It's groupbenicourt.com. There's a contact me form there. That's easy to get to me there too. The Benicourt Group on Instagram is a great way to reach me there too. Yeah, but I say LinkedIn because I'm very active on there. So that's a really good place to just send me a DM and I'll see it.
That's fair. That's fair. Anyways, any final thoughts for listeners?
I think this has been a great interview. I really appreciate that you are having these conversations because it's really important. Everything is changing so fast with technology. I think it's really important that you I'm definitely of the embrace technology for your business. My advice is no matter what industry you're in, experiment with some of these AI tools that are out there. I know for Benicourt Group, we're always looking for really innovative ways to tell stories. And I've been working on just in off hours on, day when things are quiet around the house, I'm just on my computer. I've been working on creating like interactive games on educational ones about my industry on some of these platforms. And it's fascinating what you can create. And it's wonderful. So when it comes to storytelling, think about all the different tools that are available that you can leverage to tell stories in innovative and fun and creative ways. That's something I'm practicing, but I'm preaching it too, because I think it's going to really help empower you and your team for the continuation of much more advancements and changes and things in technology.
All right. Thank you, Angela, for joining Digital Coffee Marketing Brew and sharing your knowledge on global communication and crisis management.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. No, this has been great. I'm so happy you had me on. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for listening. As always, please subscribe to this podcast on all your favorite podcasting apps and leave a 5-star review. It really does help with the rankings. Let me know how I'm doing. And join me next week as I talk about what's going on in the PR and marketing industry. All right, guys, stay safe. Get to understanding what you need to make a better crisis plan and for your global communication. And see you next week. Later.